Over the last 6 months, the emergence of COVID-19 has had a profound impact on all of our lives. There seems little doubt that it will continue to cause disruption and challenge for a long time to come. The very fact that we're meeting over Zoom rather than enjoying each other's fellowship in person is a perfect illustration of the changes that we've had to make. The image here, all too familiar in our day-to-day lives, would have been unthinkable at the beginning of this year. In this moment of crisis, drastic measures have been taken to keep us safe whilst allowing life to continue. Many of these have cost huge sums of money, and these transformations have not been easy. Some of the impacts will affect us negatively for years to come, although others present new opportunities to reinvent our way of life. Building back better is a phrase that we've become used to. It speaks to the ambition to hold on to some of the positives that have emerged during the lockdown period, such as some greater social cohesion, quieter roads, cleaner air. The pandemic, however, is not the only crisis facing our world right now. We're in the middle of a climate emergency, and the evidence for that is all around us. We have known this was coming for a long time, ever since the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published its first report in 1990. And that, scarily enough, is 30 years ago. They're clear warnings of what would happen if we allowed carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere to continue to build up. The current concentration of carbon dioxide is 410 parts per million. That's more than it's been in 800,000 years and nearly 50% higher than it was before the Industrial Revolution. It's gone up by an astonishing 10% in the last 20 years alone. And temperatures have followed. The average global temperature is already 1 degree higher than in pre-industrial times. And what were those warnings back in 1990? Well, they were for more severe wildfires, stronger hurricanes, warmer, wetter winters, and regular flooding. Climate change is not something that might happen in the future. It is happening, and it's happening now. These changes are having huge consequences. The climate crisis has already taken many lives and livelihoods. In June, we saw record temperatures of 38 degrees Celsius in the Arctic. In July, hundreds died as a third of Bangladesh was flooded. And this month in California, 100,000 people are having to evacuate their homes due to wildfires soon after the region broke global temperature records. Even in the UK, we can't escape the effects. We faced storms and widespread flooding in February, and now we face the worst wheat harvest in 40 years that will push up the prices of many staple foods. As we gather together today, the country of Sudan is counting the cost of devastating and unprecedented floods. These floods have killed dozens of people and left tens of thousands homeless. But this catastrophe has barely made it into the Western media. The tragedy is that as the climate emergency unfolds, it's having the greatest impact on those people least well equipped to cope with it. It's not just an environmental crisis, but it's a humanitarian issue of social justice too. As with so many issues that we face as a society, the people suffering most are not the ones who caused the problems in the first place. Yes, the greenhouse effect is responsible for rising temperatures and increasingly extreme weather. However, the rapid rise in levels of carbon dioxide is a symptom of the way in which our global economy consumes resources and emits pollutants. Just a few weeks ago, Saturday the 22nd of August, was this year's Earth Overshoot Day. And this was delayed by about a month due to the effect of COVID-19 lockdowns. That means that by the 22nd of August, we had met the limit of the ecological resources the Earth can regenerate in a year. And for the remaining 131 days, we're running a deficit. And if the whole of the Earth's population lived like the average Brit, Overshoot Day would have been the 16th of May, meaning that in the UK we're running on a deficit for over half the year. And if the whole world lived like the average American, it would have happened in March. If any business, organisation or church were running on this kind of deficit, we could not be continuing as normal. And for decades we've been asking questions about how damaging all of this is. However, despite all of the awareness, we've yet to see the meaningful changes in energy, agriculture, industry that such a crisis demands. Yet this issue has never been so urgent. The UN Secretary General said that if we don't change course by 2020, we risk missing the point where we can avoid runaway climate change, with disastrous consequences for people and all the natural systems that sustain us. The choices we make now, here in 2020, will affect the future of humanity for thousands of years. So we recognise that our current patterns of consumption are unsustainable. We also recognise that climate change is an issue of social justice, tending to impact the poor and vulnerable more than the wealthy and well-resourced. This is an issue that we need to urgently respond to with our action as a part of our discipleship and a taking seriously of the notion that we are stewards of God's good creation. As such, at the 2019 Methodist Conference, we declared a climate emergency and called on the UK to achieve net zero emissions well before 2050. This represented a significant further step in the Methodist Church's recognition of climate change as a serious concern, which demands a strong response as an integral part of our discipleship. Back in 2011, a major report was adopted by the Methodist Conference called Hope in God's Future. That included a call to all our churches to respond to the challenge of climate change as those affirming the hope of God's continued faithfulness to creation, as those who've received the call to show love and justice to neighbours present and future, as those who've heard the warning of God's judgment of those who hear and do not act. It also urged us to be a prophetic voice in the life of our communities through promoting a change of heart among congregations, urgently, I quote, reducing church carbon footprints at every level in line with national targets. Given our affirmation that we're in the midst of a climate emergency, it is essential and urgent that we turn all of our words and intentions into meaningful action at every level. It's good to note that already around our district there's a growing commitment to responding to the challenge of climate emergency. Several churches have been awarded eco-congregation status, most recently Summerbridge in the Pateley Bridge Circuit receiving its Gold Award. We have a Getting Greener in the Yorkshire North and East District Facebook group with 80 members, and it's proving a good place for mutual encouragement. Connectionally, churches are being encouraged to hold a Climate Sunday service this autumn, which will help to root all of this at the heart of our faith. In March earlier this year, the district leadership team commissioned a piece of work by Project Rome. This company are experts in this field, and we have direct links through Professor Simon Pringle, who's a member at Gracious Street Methodist Church in Knaresborough. The terms of reference were to work with us in identifying a strategy by which we could set an achievable net zero target. This would have the goals of driving down carbon emissions, significantly improving efficiencies, lowering our energy operating costs, setting a benchmark, a goal for better practice, and building the foundations to become carbon neutral in an achievable timescale. Over the last few months, Project Rome have undertaken research within all of our 15 circuits, particularly focusing on a sample of 40 churches. They've focused on our buildings because they account for the majority of our carbon footprint. I'm most grateful to all those around our district who've been involved in providing them with information. Through this work, they've been able to help us to be clearer about how much energy we're using and from what sources, how energy efficient our properties are or aren't, and what potential there is to increase that efficiency, what we're already learning about using renewable energy around the district, and observing other factors such as travel costs, which have a direct impact on our carbon footprint. They've provided us with an initial action plan that will start the process of moving the district towards being net zero carbon. The conclusion of this initial piece of work is that, unsurprisingly, there's a lot of work to do to achieve an aim of being a net zero carbon district. However, it is achievable if we can harness our commitment, place this work at the heart of our missional activity, and access a good deal of funding that is available from external sources to support such efforts. What does this mean in practice? Well, briefly, the steps we need to take to achieve the target of becoming net zero include, firstly, switching to green tariffs. That'll probably be best done through a district-wide initiative to ensure the best outcome. Secondly, a targeted refurbishment of properties, including conversion to locally generated green energy where that's possible. And we recognise that in some church buildings this will be impossible or uneconomic to do. We'll need to have some detailed, careful considerations around the district about the potential and viability of buildings and our congregations. Thirdly, developing a strategy for external fundraising to support this work plan. This would include obtaining funding for a key officer to head up the work towards this goal. And fourthly, to encourage a commitment to lowering personal carbon footprints and looking at the way we travel and the choices we make about what we buy and consume. Doing Synod via Zoom is a good example of how we can make a difference, unwelcome as our distance from each other is today. Arising from the work today, we believe that it's ambitious but realistic to consider that we can become a net zero carbon district by 2040. Making this our target and setting this direction of travel will be and can be for us an important response to our acknowledging that we are indeed in the midst of a climate emergency, a climate crisis. It will also send an important message to the world we serve, as well as to us, of how seriously we need to take this issue. Our proposal today, therefore, is to set that intention as a synod, recognising a lot of work needs to follow from it over 2 decades, goodness me, but to set that intention that we become a net zero carbon district by 2040, that we direct the district leadership to oversee the continuing detailed work that will be needed to make this intention a reality.